Good evening. This is Gil Olson with my weekly-ish updates on what's going on in the market here. It is May 8th, 2020. This edition is called The Window is Open for Business. Don't miss it. Um, let's start with demand. We've been talking about this window of opportunity where we still have the residual from super hot spring market. This is showing time data from the company that runs the little blue boxes that tracks all the showings. So they benchmark this to the beginning of the year at 0. And then we can see that the yellow line, which is 2020, versus the blue line, which is last year, 2019. We had a stronger start to the year. The market took off a little bit faster and sooner than 2019 did. And we were higher from January 1st all the way until coronavirus hit. The whole entire time, 2020 was higher than 2019. And we kind of talked about that in that first video. We were always above. It felt like the market was pretty hot that whole time, and that started in the beginning of the year and just accelerated into when the coronavirus really started to shut everything down, which is where this data falls in. So you see this yellow line dive across the 2019 numbers and then just plummet all the way down to where it bottomed out, roughly 40% off of where it started from for the year. Really, because it was up about 30% from the beginning of the year, then it was down 50%. There was about an 80% decline in showings from March 10th until about April 1st or April 7th, it looks like here. So there's a massive decline in showings. But the moral of the story is the song I was singing on April 24th was there are still buyers out there. That 20% was we're talking about showings here. So that 20% was the 20% of really active buyers. The people that were donning the mask on April 7th when we were at the height of the fear and panic about this pandemic. Those were the people that were writing offers and really needed to buy a house. So it didn't go to 0. There was just a big decline. And that kind of is indicated in the chart that I showed that day. This was our feel of it, was like the buyer demand sort of fell off a cliff here, but there still was a lot of activity. At that time, the sellers were saying, we're going to wait till this blows over to list our house. When really that was kind of an amazing time to be there if you were adding inventory, which is we're still in that window right now. As of April 10th, we're still at the bottom. We kind of were end of March into the first or second week in April. We were kind of sputtering along the bottom, waiting for some clarity. And since then, we've had like a very sharp rebound. From that April 10th-ish date, we're looking at about a solid month from around March 10th till April 10th. And then we've had this pretty significant rebound that's just, as of May 6th, it says the rebound continues with no signs of a slowdown. If anything, it's accelerated with 17% week over week increases. So we actually anticipate this to increase and probably exceed where we were for a short amount of time. We think this is that pent-up demand that we talked about 2 weeks ago. Where that goes from here, we don't really know. We just know that these buyers are here today, and we would hope that if you're thinking about selling your property, that you see the value in participating in that exchange that we know is happening right now. I've been saying there was a definite start to this thing on the week of March 10th, but there's no definite end to this. The tongue-in-cheek analogy I've been using is like a kid peeing in the pool. Like, there was no pee in the pool, now there is pee in the pool, and we're not getting it out. So we just have to learn how to go on with the rest of the barbecue. Hopefully it diffuses a bit, but and the chlorine takes care of it. But there's no undoing the effect of coronavirus on the market. So I'm not betting on a new normal. We're not going back to the way things were. We're in a whole new world, especially in terms of economic things. So there is no going back to it. Even if the numbers start to look the same in terms of certain metrics, the fundamentals of the market and the world moving forward are going to be impacted with a lot of uncertainty. Let's put it that way. So this is unemployment rates. This is the Great Recession here, and we're shooting in a skyrocket, or like a rocket ship into outer space at 3 1/3 million unemployed right now. Obviously, some of these people will come back to work, but not all of them will. Some of these businesses are shutting down. Um, you know, the picture doesn't look good for the short to medium term and arguably long term. We're saying last 2 weeks ago that we think that right now is the best opportunity somebody's going to have to sell a house in the next 1 to 5 years. Um, because of these longer term implications. We know that these buyers are here today, and we know that these are the impacts that tomorrow's buyers are going to, the tomorrow's buyer pool is going to come from people that are living with the impacts of this, either directly or indirectly, because their business is impacted, because just the scale of this thing is basically at Great Depression levels. Even if we pull back from that and some people go back to work, the impact is just, we just don't know how it's going to happen, but we do know what's happening right now. And that's kind of the message of this window of opportunity. A lot of people are starting to see and respond to this with like, okay, I see the data. I see the buyers are there. I see your contracts. I saw the listings on the listing that you had blow up a couple weeks ago. But they come back with this, where it's like, I agree that it's very risky to sell your house 6 months from now and uncertain, but it's also, I'm dealing with the risk of the fear of the virus in my house and risking my own safety and that of the people that I love and I'm in contact with my family. And I hear this all the time. I don't want people in my house. I get what you're saying. I believe it. I'm all aboard. But I just don't want people in my house. And I can empathize with that. I just wanted to make it clear to you and whoever we've been talking to that this isn't like a either or type of decision. The response that we've been getting is kind of like, I either have to open up my doors to everybody to sell my house, or I have to just deal with the risk of waiting. And it's kind of, my point is that that's a false choice, and there should be more of a conversation around what can be done in the middle there, where you can really drastically mitigate the risk, especially right now, as opposed to just assuming all the risk and just completely waiting and moving forward. So for most people that aren't personally or their immediate family is not like, if you're not getting your food delivered to you, or you're not in one of these super high risk profile demographics, or your age and medical condition isn't putting you at severe risk for coronavirus, and you're you're not living in that extreme quarantine mode, there's a lot of options that you do have. So my point in this portion of this message is basically like, you shouldn't be having a conversation about like A or B. I either have to wait or open my doors fully. If you can answer the question of like, if there was a qualified buyer that offered you a number that was reasonable to what you expect or what you want based on where the market has been and where it is right now, which is still competitive, and they were ready to come to you with a signed contract and you would accept it, the question should be like, how do I get onto the market without getting a ton of people through my house? And there's ways to do that between 3D tours, really qualifying people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's worth having that conversation more in depth in terms of the options that we have at our disposal, because there is definitely a difference between sitting completely out and not even being prepared for the market with media to share with buyer inquiries that we get on similar properties versus or fully marketing the property, but having very strict guidelines in terms of who and when and how people can show the house, versus not being prepared and then just waiting indefinitely. I believe that it's in people's best interest to really be prepared to work with these buyers today, as opposed to we can basically, the coronavirus and this whole epidemic has shifted the market to the point where we can do about 80% of the job, or almost 90% of the job of selling a house and getting people emotionally committed to a property before they step foot in it, because they understand the difference in in the scenario that we're in, and the fact that there's such limited inventory in the market. And that's why there's this yellow line in this window of opportunity with an asterisk, because there are new listings coming to the market every single day. This is just this last week. We're approaching numbers in the 30s and 40s and 50s per day of new inventory hitting the market. And if that continues and those numbers start to rise, which we think that they will in this in the natural season, plus the pent up demand from the last few weeks when people have been withholding listings. As that happens, you'll have a little less leverage. You will definitely have less leverage in terms of being able to essentially force people to get committed to the house or be very interested in the house before you let them in the door. Right now, we do have options like that. A month from now, a month and a half from now, you probably won't, because the inventory will be more, and they won't have to deal with that, and the consumers won't put up with that as an option. They won't jump through the hoops because they've got other options in terms of houses. They'll just go and see and buy something else. So the moral is, right now they will. Like I said, we can do about 80 to 90% of the job before they do that. It's sort of like how Tesla would sell cars online almost exclusively, and they'd offer an incentive if you could purchase the car without doing a test drive. And people would just buy 70, 80, $100,000 cars without test driving them at all because they did such a good job marketing it, and they just knew that it was a quality product. The consumer right now is more adapted to that. Other car dealerships are selling cars online right now, and the consumer is more tolerant of that because they don't want to jump through the hoops. So while there's limited inventory, you do have this window to be able to market your property and get interested people engaged with the property, and then figure out how to let them do a final walkthrough before they sign pen to paper. But they're basically there, and we can negotiate price basically right when we get there if your property is desirable enough. So the moral of the story is, I'm encouraging people to have that conversation with us, see what the option is. You give us the constraints, and we'll educate you as to how we can work around them. Or if if it's not, we just need to know what the inventory is so we can, be aware of it as we're having conversations with people as they run into not being able to find the house that they want. So we'll keep this updated. The next one will probably come out maybe a week and a half, something like that. I hope you guys are finding this helpful. If you have any questions, just hit us up. Talk to you soon. Cheers.